Hello and welcome to Wellness in Today's World, the podcast that we talk about psychology, wellness, and everything in between. I'm Debra Kawahara, your host, and with each episode, we talk about what it means to live well. I am so delighted that we have Dr. Suzan Song here, Harvard and Stanford trained psychiatrist, humanitarian mental health expert, the author of Why We Suffer and How We Heal. I'm just so happy that she has agreed to talk to me today about this book. Her framework for healing, what she calls the 3 friends of winter, that talks about narrative, ritual, and purpose as elements of healing from trauma and adversity. Dr. Song, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right, let's get started. So I wanted to start with just your personal journey. I know from your story, and it's in the book, talk about how your journey influenced you to become a psychiatrist, humanitarian, and mental health clinician.
I grew up in a liquor store outside of Baltimore, Maryland. My parents were from Korea. And, we had robberies now and then, but one of them went bad and my father was assaulted outside a liquor store. And he later passed away, but I think that, I was 15 years old at the time. And I think that, like everybody else, when you experience major life events, it changes your reality. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's when I came close to experiencing suffering and understanding how people navigate through the world. Like, how do you continue to live when everything's uncertain? That was kind of my entry points. And that, of course, led me to mental health and psychiatry and stories and thinking about how people just get through really hard times. My family is Korean. I was born and raised, I'm Korean American. I think the duality of having different cultural aspects in how people recover was always very interesting to me. And that got me into working across cultures and contexts in different countries.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you talk about, and I think as you reflect back on your life, you talk about stability and instability and how that might have made you choose certain things. So I wanted you to talk about that stability, how you found that as something that may have influenced your choices in your life.
Yeah, I had, because growing up, and of course the liquor store, we often had, robberies and things. And so I always said to myself, the logic model basically goes like, if we had a stable life, we would not have had a liquor store. If we didn't have a liquor store, my father would still be alive. And so for me, the life success is really having a stable life. Mm-hmm. So you work really hard, you go to, and we're kind of groomed this way, right? We're told at a young age, this is what school you should go to, the grades you should get, even who to marry, what job you should have. Like, that stability is supposed to protect you from who knows what in the future.
Yeah.
And so for me, growing up, that's what I wanted. Like, I knew that a stable life would be protective in some way until you realize that's just an illusion. Like, there are temporary moments of stability, but life challenges are just going to happen.
Yeah.
Whether we win it or not, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, what I found interesting, though, is seeking that stability, and yet you chose to go to these other parts of the world as a humanitarian mental health expert and put yourself, I remember one of the stories you told about how dangerous some of the situations you found yourself. So it was kind of like, well, that's interesting, you seeking stability and like choices in your career and things like that. And yet you also chose kind of danger and instability in some ways.
Yeah, I think this is the fascinating. I think people think externally it looks so unstable, right? I worked in war zones, post-genocide with former child soldiers. I work with survivors of hostage and trafficking around the world. But so it looks like it's very unstable.
Right.
But actually for me, it was a stable returning to a to something that was familiar to me.
Uh-huh.
And I think I didn't realize it until almost 2 decades later, after my father passed away. I was in Burundi. I found myself in hiding from former child soldiers for my life. They were targeting me. And I thought, how in the world did I get here? Like, what is going on? I'm an Asian American woman now in the middle of nowhere and hiding for my life from child soldiers. And immediately it was, oh, it's Dad. So I think I had recreated a very similar scene of violence, but this time I would have the control over the outcome. This is the repetition compulsion.
Right.
But I didn't understand it at the time. And I was upping the ante. I mean, at one point I thought about going undercover in the trafficking world, right? And so it was almost like I'm pushing the limits as if I'm trying to die. And so at some point, and I think it was the Burundi incident, where I had to step back and say, what is going on? Like, how am I living this life right now?
When I was reading the book, I was writing like repetition, compulsion, reenactment, in terms of just repetitively putting yourself in these situations and can I change the outcome? But it seemed like eventually you got to the point of, I realize what's pulling me to these situations, why I feel such affinity to be in those situations and helping these people, because you probably saw yourself in them in some ways.
Yes, and I think we all do this. We all live our life in these patterns, right? Where we say, you know, how am I in the same, another relationship that's not healthy or toxic in some way? Like, how am I here yet again? Even though I told myself I would never be in this, right? So we keep replaying the same patterns, not really understanding the driving force behind them.
Going to the first part of your title, Why We Suffer, and it's such a age-old question, right, to understand why we suffer. I mean, I think religions try to explain why we suffer. So I wanted you to talk about kind of your own thinking and learning about why we suffer, and are there any common elements across humanity in terms of suffering?
Yeah, I think suffering is, as I see it, is essentially when our reality does not match our wishes. So there is something going on in our lives right now, and we wish it were different. And we oftentimes don't know how to make that change. And that, to me, is what I see as suffering. Now, there's the real suffering of human rights violations, trafficking, right? Those are events that cause suffering. And then there are the more ordinary daily life stressors that we all go through, where sometimes it's the stories and the explanations, it's our narratives about that event that actually create the suffering. And what I found, you know, to your question around, is there some humanity, kind of human element to it that crosses cultures? I think suffering is largely culturally dependent. So the culture in which one is embedded in tells you what suffering is and what is not suffering, and how you should deal with it and what's not appropriate. So in this country, in the US, we often individualize suffering quite a bit. So if there's something that we're going through, we're told, talk to a therapist, you know, do one-on-one introspection. But in many parts of the world, I mean, there are no therapists. Right. And they don't have the same focus on the individual. So their suffering is very much in relation with others. So it's shared. It's not, so the burden is not just on one person as it is here.
What it makes me think about, I mean, I know you talk about intergenerational stress. I know I've studied intergenerational trauma, and that the healing process, part of that is not just like here in the US where we say individual healing, we actually talk about collective healing. And how important that is.
It's a striking thing that I've really learned, you know, like refugee camps and other settings I've worked in, is that, you know, we're so focused on self-optimization and self-regulation, and all of that's really important. But as humans, we have evolved to co-regulate with other people. And I think we've forgotten that a lot here. And in other countries, you just see it. There's more connectedness and leaning on each other, and we're not embarrassed to do so. It's just part of the cultural fabric. And I think if we absorbed some of that and adopted some of that, we'd be a lot less lonely.
Our former Surgeon General talked about how in the U.S. loneliness is an epidemic.
Yeah.
And I think, we talk about connection, and the research shows it. Connection is something that gives us longevity. Mm-hmm. And so we even know it in terms of our research and science, how important it is. And yet, I think given our individualistic, that's a generalization, but in the U.S. we kind of lean more to individualistic. Mm-hmm. But I often think, can we integrate the individual with the collective in terms of healing?
It's hard because I think sometimes, I don't want to romanticize collectivist cultures, right? Because a lot of times because of the lack of resources, they have to depend on each other just to survive.
Yeah.
But there is something, and it's just a different framework. It's not better or worse. It's just one's identity is not about me and myself. One's identity is the role. So if I go, let's say, Sierra Leone, Liberia, wherever, and I ask, how are you doing? It's not that, oh, I'm sad or I had a bad day. It's, I'm not good because I can't provide for my daughter today, mm-hmm. or, but it's something in relation to their roles. Mm-hmm. It's just a different framework.
Right. It's not about my achievement.
Right.
It's more what in relation to others that I'm able to do or not able to do.
Yeah.
And then how does that impact me?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. As you talked about it needing to be culturally contextualized, talk to me about, you write, one of the things that you believe of healing is narratives and the stories we tell ourselves. How is that so important to the healing piece of the suffering that you write about?
Yeah, so much of our suffering and our distress is based on the stories that we're telling about that. So let's say there's a breakup that happens, and oftentimes the common stories that I hear are, there's something wrong with me. That's at the baseline. Uh-huh. People think there's something wrong with me, I did something wrong, I'm not good enough or X enough, or it's my life is over. I just can't, I will never find someone again, or it's something around just this feeling that life is only going to get better if I can get back to the baseline. If I can go back to what it was. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunate because we're constantly growing and evolving.
Right.
And so we need these difficult events to decide it's our inflection point. What are we going to do with that difficult? It's not that we make lemonade out of lemons, right? But it's our opportunity to make meaning, because that is how we grow and build mastery from what's happened to us.
I had a mentor of mine talk about how, when you have these difficult events in your life or trauma, you can't go back to the person that you were before that, but you have to learn, how do I integrate that into the person that I am and becoming. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really true, that narrative has to include what has happened.
Yes, and too often I think because we have these fragmented memories and fragmented parts of our lives, we just want to push it aside and not think about it. But we need to pull our past, you're right, integrate it into our present, because it's always there.
Right.
Whether or not we want to see it. So either we be consciously aware of it and intentional, or we just let it blindly, direct our lives.
To the second component that you talk about, which is ritual. And, I think people don't realize the rituals that get kind of expected or normalized in our lives, but I want you to talk about how ritual, how you define it, and then how do people get that, I guess, in terms of the rituals that they do.
So rituals are basically something of meaning that brings you back to yourself. And it's something that gives you a sense of either, they function in a lot of important ways. So one is they can lower and help you with emotion regulation. So if you think about Steph Curry does a tunnel shot before every game, right? Or Serena Williams, I think, bounces the ball a certain number of times before she starts. Those are just emotion regulation. But rituals can also help us mourn the loss of someone or of a life that we wanted.
Yeah.
So when we think about any culture, whenever someone loses a loved one, there is a ritual of what to do. And that ritual is there to help you when you can't think, right?
Yeah.
When we're so overwhelmed, we're so upended that we need something to tell us what to do. And that's the point of rituals.
Yeah.
So they're really important binding. And I think our society right now, we're in this ritual deficit.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone's just trying with routines. Routines are managing your time, but a ritual is going to help you manage your life, right? It's going to bring you back to your values, your beliefs. They kind of incorporate your narratives.
So giving that meaning and purpose, like I know in the Japanese American culture, New Year's Day is like a renewal that you get to clean the slate and you get to look at the year ahead of us. Like you get to throw the year behind you and start anew.
Yeah.
And really thinking about renewal, you know, rejuvenation. And those rituals become part of, it kind of grounds you.
Yes. And they can be small. I think people think of rituals as like these big things, but you know, like even me, between clients, I take a 10-minute break. And my ritual now is to go, if I can, just get up and go walk around. And I don't think about anything. You know, I just think about like draining the thoughts out of my brain. So I'm like fresh for the next person, right? They're small intentional acts that we do. But they're grounding. They bring us back to like, okay, I'm going to refresh right now and bring me back to like who I am and who I want to be.
What it also makes me think is at a time where it may be tumultuous internally, that those things you don't have to think about because they're laid out. And it's like, okay, I know this.
Yes.
So it gives you some permanency. It gives you kind of reminders of things that you can predict.
Yes.
Which probably really helps in like, okay, this thing I know.
Yes. So I'm actually a mass violence incident responder. And one of the communities I was working with was after the Lunar New Year massacre a few years back in Monterey Park, California. And you're right, when you have these events, they're unexpected and they have this way of upending not just your world, but your thoughts of a safe world. And so when you can have a ritual, especially that binds you to a community, and you know that you're embedded with other people and you engage in a ritual together, it's predictable and it restores safety. And that's really important when you've been upended.
Yeah. It's something that regulates you in some ways. So the third element of your framework, which I think is what I like about it is it's clear and it's also practical, is purpose, meaning, and connection as the third element. So I wanted you to talk about that more, because I think we hear about purpose, but it's like, how does one do that?
Yeah. So where narratives help you with insight, rituals then embody that insight into action and movement, and then purpose gives you direction for one's life. And I think purpose is misunderstood. Many people think purpose is like passion or it's achievement or it's goals, but purpose is not something to be found. It's basically something that's larger than yourself, of meaning. We often think we have to find our purpose, but most of the time people are already living out their purpose. So all we need to do is just connect and ask ourselves, where in our worlds are we feeling resonance? Where are we feeling coherence? Where are we kind of vibing with where our values, our actions, and our words, they're all aligned, right? That's giving some sort of insight into one's purpose.
Do you think, as you were talking, it made me think about kind of the values that you hold and that aligning your values with what you think, what you do, how you live.
Yeah, I mean, values are essential, and values can change over time, right? But there tend to be a few core sets that stay with us. And I think when we can embody that, and purpose is really just saying we want to embody our values into practice. And now this is the direction of who we want to become. that can help us through so many hard. I mean, I work with a hostage survivor, and he was in total deprivation for a number of years. And one thing he said was, one thing that was very helpful to him was when he thought about all of the hostages currently. And he said, if I ever get out, it's going to be my purpose in life to make sure they're not feeling left behind. And that purpose carried him throughout all that deprivation, right? So there's a lot of power in
Yeah. That's just, what a powerful story of that. So the three elements we just talked about, I mean, one of the memorable concepts that I love that how you put it is the 3 friends of winter. And I actually wanted you to talk about how did you come up with those 3 friends of winter and then how they work together?
Yeah, so it was actually pretty easy. So when I was a child, after my father passed away, I spent a lot of time in our living room.
Okay.
And my living room always had these Asian art scrolls.
Yes.
Yes, right? Yeah. And so there's a very common Asian art motif called the 3 Friends of Winter, and it's pine, plum blossom, and bamboo. And those are the 3 hardiest plants of the winter. So they persevere, they can withstand the harshest of weather. And so I grew up with that surrounding me, and I kind of always thought about that motif. And so when it was time to write this book and to think about, really the book is asking the question, if instability is part of our lives, how do we find aliveness within it? How do we keep on connecting and find a sense of belonging and contribute to the world, even when our life is not what we want it to be? And so it was kind of easy to map on these narrative, ritual, and purpose onto the 3 friends of winter. And I like that it's friends because it's a reminder that our sense of aliveness and living and recovery is embedded in relationships. It's not just a solo act.
Yeah. I mean, the words that came to my mind was adversity, but also the resilience and hardiness of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people often think that resilience is bouncing back, but I always wonder, bouncing back to what, right? So I see resilience. I mean, there are a lot of people who have grit and they barrel through and they keep on going, but to me, that's just endurance.
Right.
And maybe they're enduring something they shouldn't be enduring.
Right.
So resilience, yes.
We see that a lot, actually.
Yes. So I think of resilience as being able to embrace the instability at hand and not lose ourselves. So we still find ways to love and live, even as we're going through really hard times.
I'm going to turn to your humanitarian work because that is one of the things I think people may look at you and not even think, oh, she's just a psychiatrist, she's always lived here, but you've been all over the world working with children's soldiers, working with hostages, working in refugee camps. So I wanted to have you talk about, these communities that face these profound adversities. What have you seen in terms of their resilience and hope that then, like you talked about, give them a reason to continue going?
Yeah. I mean, some of this, when I started off in this work, it was really, I was thankful I had this parallel career. So I started off my training in psychiatry in the US, but I had a parallel career doing policy and public health research in humanitarian settings. And so I would go back and forth between the two, and they really informed each other. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was truly that healing does not happen individually. You just see so many communities, and I'm used to narrative being the main modality, like autonomy and insight. That is how we heal. That's how we in the US treat healing. But in other, for example, I work with a former child soldier who's a girl soldier, and she had been a sex slave for a number of years. And so I was working with her doing a study, and I was kind of listening for how she got through, because she actually was living and contributing very well. She had a good life. And she said it was one thing that really helped her, which was the village elder came and did a body purification ritual for her. And so it was just a ritual.
Uh-huh.
And it atoned her of her sins. It allowed her to then be part of the community. And she said that was the main thing. I now have a sense of belonging, and I can now restore my identity as like a civilian, not a former child soldier.
Uh-huh.
And that sense of belonging and reshaping of her identity really allowed her to engage in the world in a very different way. And there was no talking about it with someone. It was just the ritual of it. So I think there are lots of ways that I think if you want to learn about something, you learn from the most extreme. And so these are like some of the most extreme settings.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of lessons that we can all take away from.
So for our audience, if someone's carrying a wound, whether it's minor or major, what's like one step that they can take in terms of the healing of that wound?
So the first thing is to remember that like life is hard, right? So this is just like, this is part of life. There are going to be major life challenges. So life is hard. And also it's harder when we do it alone. So to seek out somebody, right? Friend, family member, anybody, micro conversations with people, but just don't isolate, because shame breeds in isolation. So we don't isolate. Reach out to other people. And sometimes we don't have to go inwards. We can go outwards. So we think about, who do we want to matter to? Right? Who do we matter to right now? Mm-hmm. And who do we want to matter to? Because that helps us just get outside of ourselves for a little bit.
Yeah.
And just give us a break from that suffering.
I know when you write, it takes a lot out of you, and there's a process to it. So now that your book has been published, Why We Suffer and How We Heal, what would be your hope of readers in kind of reading your book, and what you wanted to actually impact, the impact that you wanted?
People feel like they're not alone, and that oftentimes when we're going through a hard time, we look outwards for answers. And I hope the book reminds people that they have a lot of tools already to tap into. So they don't always have to look outwards. Sometimes we can first just find confidence in ourselves that you already have some tools easily accessible right now. And to let them know that they're really not alone in that process.
I really like that, because it's like kind of what you're saying is you have it in you.
Yeah.
It's not that you're deficient. Mm-hmm. It's like just you need to go back to remember your strengths.
Yes.
And you have them.
Yeah.
You have them there.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, last question. If you could leave a message about suffering, because like you said, life is, being Buddhist, life is suffering. Yeah. We just know that is part of the life experience and healing. And what would you say people could do to then lead to a meaningful life?
Well, it's understanding that stability is an illusion, that the question isn't, will I experience something really hard? It's, will we have the tools to not lose ourselves when they do happen? And the way that we find grounding is to identify our stories, our backstories, to find a sense of rituals and practice when there are times we just can't think through what to do, and to practice those ahead of time. And to think about, who do we want to matter to? And who do we want to become? And to let that guide a lot of our decisions and guide our energies and our resources now. Because at the end, we all have one go around this planet.
Yeah.
So to be intentional about what we want to do with it.
Oh, just beautiful. And Dr. Song, I can't thank you enough for being willing to be here, to sharing your wisdom, sharing your life experience, and sharing all of your knowledge that you put together for us.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And if there are any therapists out there who are interested in working in humanitarian settings, I actually have a nonprofit called Global Collective Institute, and we have trainings for psychologists and psychiatrists who want to work in humanitarian settings. So come and join. It's
there you go. You know, what I found so powerful in this conversation is I think you're not saying it's only up to that person to heal.
Yeah.
That there is a collective, and to be able to utilize the collective in terms of caring for one another.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So, you know, thank you again for being here. And to our listeners, thank you for joining Wellness in Today's World. As always, remember, wellness is a journey, not a destination. Until next time, please take good care of yourself and each other.